Filmy, we're going to start on the top of 54a. The Gemara has been discussing, first of all, the dispute about whether or not we say hezek she'eino nikar, damage that's not recognizable to the eye, like invisible damage, if that's considered to be damages. And Chizkiah says, biblically speaking, it is physical damages, and Rabbi Yochanan says, biblically speaking, it's not physical damages. Then the Gemara says, well, should we connect this to a dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, where they both rule about this case, similar case of Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan, they rule about the case of Midame Menasech, that Rabbi Meir says if you do it b'shogeg, you're going to be liable, and Rabbi Yehuda says you're not liable. So maybe Rabbi Meir and Chizkiah are the same, and Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehuda are the same. The Gemara says no, Rabbi Yochanan really would agree that both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda say hezek she'eino nikar is not damages. So if that's the case, why does Rabbi Meir says you're liable in the case where you make somebody else's food tameh? So the Gemara says that the dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is whether hezek is whether we're konei shogeg atumezid, whether if you do something accidentally, if you damage somebody else's property, in this case accidentally, we're going to penalize you so that you don't come to do it intentionally. Rabbi Meir says we will penalize you. We are konei shogeg atumezid, but Rabbi Yehuda says we're not. The Gemara says, but wait, isn't that a contradiction within Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda elsewhere? Because what about the case where, do we really say Rabbi Meir says konei shogeg atumezid? Because what about the case where you cook accidentally on Shabbos? That if you cook accidentally on Shabbos under those circumstances, that Rabbi Meir is going to say that under those circumstances, that Rabbi Meir is not konei shogeg atumezid, and Rabbi Yehuda is. So the Gemara says, well, there Rabbi Meir is not going to penalize you because it's a biblical law. Rabbi Meir only penalizes you for if you do it accidentally by a rabbinic law. And so the Gemara, so that's the distinction in that case. And Rabbi Yehuda is the opposite. Rabbi Yehuda only penalizes you by a biblical law, but not by a rabbinic law. So the Gemara says, well, this is a contradiction. You're saying that Rabbi Meir only penalizes you by a rabbinic law, not a biblical law. But what about the case of the Shemitah year, where there Rabbi Meir does penalize you if you planted on the Shemitah year? And that's by a brisa which says it contradicts with that if you plant accidentally on Shemitah year, Rabbi Meir says, and the Rabbi Meir says you have to uproot it, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says you don't. But on Shabbos, if you plant accidentally, that you could keep it, and Rabbi Yehuda says that you have to uproot it. So the Gemara says, well, the contradiction between Rabbi Meir by Shabbos and Shemitah year is because the Shemitah year is something that you count backwards to know that it's there, whereas Shabbos you don't. Shabbos, you don't really count backwards and start from Shabbos, because the Shemitah year, you say, oh, I'm in the 6th year, and then you'll notice, that you planted in the sabbatical year, and then you'll maybe think it's okay to plant on the Shemitah year. But Shabbos, you won't work like that. You won't say, 14 weeks ago I did this, I planted on Shabbos. You won't realize that. Gemara says, but sometimes there are some circumstances, the Gemara says on 54a, there are some circumstances where you have to do that. Like, for example, with the counting of Orla, it's if you planted 30 days before the year. So the Gemara says, okay, there's another reason why Rabbi Meir is strict about the sabbatical year, because the sabbatical year people don't normally take strictly. And so therefore he's going to say that if you accidentally plant in the sabbatical year, you have to uproot it. But people are not concerned about the Shabbos. We're not concerned people are going to violate the Shabbos. So now on 54a, we start today's Daf Yomi, 7 lines from the top. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda lo kasha. And the fact is, with Rabbi Yehuda, why does Rabbi Yehuda, it's not going to be a difficulty. Again, why does Rabbi Yehuda not penalize somebody who plants on the sabbatical year, even though he penalizes somebody who plants on the Shabbos and cooks on Shabbos even accidentally? But on the sabbatical year, Rabbi Yehuda says that if you planted accidentally, you could keep it. But on the Shabbos, if you planted accidentally, or if you cook accidentally on Shabbos, he says, we penalize you. So what's the distinction? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda will kasha, Rabbi Yehuda chamiro shvius. Because in the place of Rabbi Yehuda, he didn't need to make a gezerah about shvius. He didn't need to make a takana about sabbatical year, because everybody there was so strict. And the Gemara tells us a very sad story. There was a person who turned to his friend, and he he insulted him. He said to him, Dair bar diarta. He says, you're a convert, the son of another convert. That was the way he was trying to insult him. That's a biblical prohibition to insult a convert. And that's what he said to him. Amarle, so the guy responds, he said, listen, I actually don't eat sabbatical fruits like you do. So we see that was considered to be an insult that you eat sabbatical fruits. By the way, the eating of the sabbatical fruits is according to some a mitzvah. It's just you have to do it the right way. It means saying I don't eat the sabbatical fruits in violation of the Torah the way you eat them, because you have to eat them in the proper manner. And so that's the issue. But anyway, we see that in the place of Rabbi Yehuda, they were very careful about the laws of the sabbatical year, and so therefore, if you planted it accidentally, he didn't need to penalize you. Tashma, so the Gemara is again now going to bring a proof that Rabbi Meir actually did not, because we had said that what was Rabbi Meir saying, that in the case that the reason why Rabbi Meir penalized you if you if you were matame somebody else's thing, is because somebody else's property. It's because Rabbi Meir was konei shogeg atunezis. He penalized you if you did it accidentally, because you might come to do it intentionally. Gemara is going to bring a brisa that proves that Rabbi Meir says we don't penalize you if you do it accidentally by rabbinic law. So it's a contradiction to what we said Rabbi Meir said. So the Gemara says Tashma. Let's say the following case: Achol truma tameya. Let's say you ate a Kohen's food, his truma food, which only a Kohen could eat, but you ate it when it was tamei, so it's of much less value because the Kohen can't eat it; he has to burn it. Nevertheless, mishalim chulin tahor, and you have to pay him back with a much higher premium. You have to pay him back with regular food, which can be eaten by everybody, and that it's tahor. So you have to give him back you have to pay him back at a premium. But let's say shilim chulin tamei, but let's say you paid him back with the chulin food that was tamei. You didn't pay him back with the tahor food. You paid him back with the chulin food, which was tamei. Ma, what would be the law under those circumstances? Amar sumchos mishum Meir b'shogi, that if you did this accidentally, tashlum of tashlumin. If you did this accidentally, it's considered to be a valid payment. B'mezid ein tashlum of tashlumin. But if you did it intentionally, it's not considered a valid payment. And Chacham say in both cases it's a valid payment, meaning to say that the Kohen acquires it and it's his money, and he could even be betrothed a woman with it. But the choser mashalim chulin tarim, you have to go back and you pay him back with regular chulin. And we asked the question about that. But mezid amay ein tashlum of tashlumin. If you paid him intentionally, why is it not a valid payment? Tavo of bracha, you should be blessed for it. He ate something that the Kohen is not allowed to eat, even when he's tamei. He can't eat the truma tameya. And he paid him with something that he can eat when he's tamei, i.e. the chulin food that's tamei. And so Rava says, and Kadi, some say it's a person's name, and some say it's just that they say it was taught. Chisuri mechsra. The source is missing words. This is what we mean to say. Achol truma tameya, that if he eats achol truma tameya, if he ate the truma that was tamei, mishalim koldehu, then he could pay back with anything. Anything he could eat. Rashi says he could pay back with anything. He could pay back anyway, anything that's chulin, whether it's tahor or whether it's tamei. But achol truma tahora. But if he ate the truma that was not tamei, that was tahora, then he has to pay. Then he has to pay with chulin tahorim. He has to pay with chulin that's not tamei. Shilim chulin tamein. Let's say he paid with the chulin that was tamei. Mahu. Sumchas omer mishum Rabbi Meir, and this is why we're reciting this whole source. That Rabbi Meir taught kashogeg tashlum of tashlumin, b'mezid ein tashlum of tashlumin. That if he did it accidentally, it's valid, but if he did it biblically speaking, it's not valid. And Chacham say in either case, we're going to say it's valid, but he has to repay again, meaning to say the Kohen gets it, but he has to go back and pay. But we see from here, the upshot of the source is the Rameir says if he did it valid, he doesn't have to pay again. If he did it accidentally, he doesn't have to pay again. Even though it's a rabbinic, this whole concept that you have to pay in this manner is rabbinic law. And yet Rabbi Meir is not going to be penalizing you in a case of a rabbinic law where you do something accidentally. And that's a Ravacha Avika said that. What's the dispute? The whole case here is the distinction between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim is whether if you do something accidentally, we're going to penalize you because you might come to do it intentionally. The Rabbi Meir suffer well. The Rameir says we're not going to penalize you if you do something accidentally because you might come to do it intentionally. Come say you will. And so we see from here is the contradiction to the way we tried to explain Rabbi Meir before. The dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Meir says that you penalize somebody if he does something accidentally because he might come to by rabbinic law. So, and here Rabbi Meir is saying we're not. So the Gemara says, the two cases are totally distinct. Because Hasam Gavra was Shlume Kamakavin. In this case here, Rabbi Meir is not going to penalize you if you did it accidentally because your whole intent was to pay back the person. This guy comes along, he's trying to pay back the person. And not Nakum, what was the witness say? We're going to get up and penalize him. He's trying to pay back. And because he made a mistake in his attempt to pay back, we're going to penalize you? No. Whereas before, is he accidentally messed up the guy's property. So that he wasn't trying to do something good. He just made a mistake accidentally. So, but there, we'll penalize you. But here he's trying to do something good. So we're not going to penalize you. Gemara gives another attempt to prove that Rabbi Meir is, again, that you don't penalize somebody. Gemara assumes these next couple of brises are also attributed to Rabbi Meir, and that we're not going to penalize, that we say that Rabbi Meir doesn't penalize you by a rabbinic mistake. What's the case here? Tashma dam shenitma. Let's say you have the blood of the sacrifice that became tamei, vizarku, but you still went ahead and sprinkled it on the altar. So bishogeg, if you do it accidentally, hurtza, we're going to say it's effective. Bemazid, lo hurtza. But if you did it intentionally, it's not effective. If you did it accidentally, it's intentional, it's okay, because the tzitz is mechaper, because we have a statement that the forehead plate of the Kohen Gadol is going to serve as an atonement. So biblically speaking, it's okay. So therefore, if it's accidental, it's just rabbinically speaking that it's no good. And so therefore, this seems to be contradicting what Rabbi Meir is saying, because here we're saying that even though it was a rabbinic problem, we're going to say that if you did it accidentally, it's okay. And this price, it does not penalize you. Pass the tissues. Okay. I got it. Thanks. I'm sorry, you had a question? No. So we don't. So Bill was asking a good question. Don't we? We always say that rabbinically we're more lenient than biblically. So the answer to that is typically we say that by rabbinic laws we're going to be more lenient than biblically. But sometimes we do the opposite because we want to strengthen the rabbinic law because people aren't taking it as seriously. So Rabbi Meir was saying we need to strengthen it. We're going to penalize you by rabbinic law because people be like, oh, it's just rabbinic, like, the first day of Yom Tov I'm going to keep, but the second day, 2 days Yom Tov, it's just rabbinic. I'm not going to keep it. You hear a lot of that in America. Or you say like, oh, this is just a rabbinic law. I don't have to be strict about it. So therefore, the rabbis will be like, okay, we need to be more strict here. So in this case, why are the rabbis penalizing you? They're not penalizing you by the rabbinic law. So Amracha Rabbi Meir, two cases are distinct. You want to say the two cases are the same? That person over there was trying to sprinkle the blood. He was trying to achieve an atonement. We're going to penalize him when he's trying to achieve an atonement. No, we're not going to penalize him when he's trying to achieve an atonement. Gemara again tries to prove this. Tashma. Says the Brisa, another attempt. So biblically speaking, you're allowed to take a tithe. You can't eat your food until it's tithe. Biblically speaking, you can make a tithe on Shabbos, but rabbinically, we don't. The rabbis say you're not allowed to do it because the Rashi says it looks like you're fixing the food, and so therefore it's not allowed. So it's a rabbinic prohibition. So a maaser b'Shabbat, yeah, you can't eat if it wasn't tithe, you can't eat it. So it says rabbinically speaking, it's a prohibition. So a maaser b'Shabbos, but let's say you did the tithe on Shabbos. So bishogeg, if you did it accidentally because you forgot it was Shabbos, yeyachal, you can eat it. But mezid lo yeyachal. But biblically speaking, if you did intentionally, you can't eat it. So again, it's a problem because here we're saying that by a rabbinic law, we're not going to penalize you if you did it accidentally. This seems to contradict what Rabbi Meir taught. So the Gemara's answer is, these two cases are not the same. Hasam Gavra with Tekuni Kamakafin. Now like him doesn't say again, here too, this guy was trying to do a good mitzvah. So he did it accidentally, we're gonna penalize him. Another attempt. Again, you know how to immerse your utensil in the mikvah on Shabbos, because again, it's milsik and it looks like you're fixing the utensil. So let's say you did it. If you did it accidentally, b'shogeg, yishtamish ben, you could use it, but mezer lo yishtamish ben. If you did it purposely, you can't use it. Again, the Gemara says, are these two the same cases? And now, like him doesn't say there, the whole intent was just his person was trying to purify utensils. So we're going to get up and penalize him. So therefore, the Gemara says we don't accept all these cases. So the Gemara, but remember what we had said earlier, that Rabbi Meir had said we penalize you if you do it rabbinically, accidentally, but not biblically. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda said the opposite. Rabbi Yehuda said we penalize you if you accidentally violate the biblical law, so that you don't purposely violate it, but not by rabbinic law. By rabbinic law, if you did it accidentally, we don't penalize you. So the Gemara says, "V'rami the Rabbi Yehuda, but let's show that there's a contradiction within Rabbi Yehuda's position. The Tanya, because we learned in the price, so we're on the top of 54b. Naflu v'nispatzu. Let's say, what's the case? Let's say you have these types of nuts, which were called egoze perach, which are typically speaking, if you have orla, fruit that is not yet grown 3 years, then it is nullified 1 in 200. But these egoze perach, they're so important, they're so distinguishable, they're not nullified even 1,000 times the amount. That's if they're not crushed. Once they're crushed, they're nullified, regular speaking, in 200. Yeah, you had a question, Bill? No, ask your question. What's that? You sure? So if let's say you have these nuts,
just say they're crushed.
If they're crushed, then they're going to be nullified if they fall into a larger mixture because they lose their specialness. Like crushed nuts, they're not as special. But if it's a whole nut, then it's not nullified because it's such a distinguished item. A distinguished item, if it falls into a mixture, is not nullified usually. Generally speaking, we say, so this is an important law. Biblically speaking, nullified in the majority. Rabbinically speaking, there's different levels. Non-kosher and kosher, meat and milk, it's 1 in 60. But orla is 1 in 200. Truma is 1 in 100. So orla is the first few years of the fruit, the first 3 years of the fruit, that has to be 1 in 200. You got a question, Neve?
I mean, it's just interesting that the non-kosher is nullified in larger amount than the orla.
Yeah.
I think the opposite.
Why?
Because non-kosher you want to be more careful about.
Then orla?
Yeah.
Why? So that can cut both ways. If it affects more people, then more people know about it. Okay, but anyway, that's the rule. So the naflu, so let's say you have these nuts that they fell into the mixture, vinispatsu, and then afterwards they became crushed. So echad sheugeg ve'echad mezid lo yalu. Different Meir says it doesn't matter how it happened, accidentally or not, it's not going to be nullified. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda, that's what Rabbi Yehuda said. Basically, it's a rabbinic law here, and it's not nullified. So the contradiction on Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says if it's accidental by rabbinic law, we're lenient. Whereas Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Omer, b'shogeg yalu, b'mezid lo yalu. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon say if it happened accidentally, we're going to be lenient, but not intentionally. But here, biblically speaking, it's nullified in a majority. Rabbanan who the Gazor and the rabbis are the one who say it's not nullified. Because Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda is penalizing you even by rabbinic law. So why is Rabbi Yehuda being strict by a rabbinic law? The Gemara explains, no, there Rabbi Yehuda is going to be strict, even though it's just a rabbinic law, because it's really tempting to be a rumi, like to do a legal fiction and to say, oh, I dropped it in accidentally, and to intentionally try to do it, we have to be on guard there. So there, it's a special reason to be strict. Gemara says, but what about Rabbi Yossi's position? That Rabbi Yossi says that Rabbi Yossi's position here. Rabbi Yossi says here that if it was done accidentally, it can be nullified, but intentionally it cannot be nullified. But doesn't this contradict what Rabbi Yossi says in the Mishnah and Arla the Tanah? And what does Rabbi Yossi say there? Rabbi Yossi says, let's say you have a plant of an Arla tree or a grapevine that became mixed in with other plants. You can't pick that fruit. And if you did pick it, it could be nullified 1 in 200 as long as it wasn't your intent. Where Rabbi Yossi says, that Rabbi Meir says, Rabbi Yossi says, even if it was your intent to pick that fruit, meaning to say that you intended to intentionally pick it and add it to your mixture, it's still going to be nullified. So earlier, Rabbi Yossi had said that if you intended to nullify something, it's not nullified. But here he says if you intend to nullify it, it could still be nullified 1 in 200. So it seems to be a contradiction between Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara says, so what's the reason? The reason here is because Rabbi Yossi says the Gzera is not going to apply in this case because the decree of the rabbis is only on a common circumstance. But this is an atypical circumstance because we have a presumption that a person does not prohibit his vineyard with one sapling. So therefore, it's not likely that someone is going to do this scenario, and so therefore, we're not going to make a decree against it. The person doesn't typically make one plant there, so it's an atypical circumstance, so we're not going to make the decree. So now the Mishnah tells us, let's see the Kohanim, when they're bringing the sacrifice on behalf of a regular Jew in the temple, and the Kohen had the improper thought, and therefore the sacrifice became disqualified. If they did this intentionally, they're going to be liable. So now the Gemara has a very interesting sugya, very, very powerful sugya. Let's say the person's working with you on your food that needs to be in a state of ritual purity, let's say truma. And he says to him, he says, oh, listen. I say to the guy, listen, Reuben says to the Kohen, he says to Aaron, he says, listen, this truma that I'm making with you, nitmu, actually became, I was tamei, I made it tamei. Or he's bringing his sacrifices. He says, this meat that I was helping schlep for you, this bagul, I made it, or the Kohen says, I made it bigul, I made it not kosher, basically. Neman, he's going to be believed. But if let's say he says, listen, the ta'aros, the truma that I touched for you back on Monday, or nitmu, or isvachim shasiti imcha biyom poni, or the meat that I touched back on Monday in this bagul, he says, I made it tamei on Monday, or it became pigul on Monday, Eino neman, he's not believed. And what's the distinction between the two cases? Ma'ishna reisha, ma'ishna seifa. And what's the difference between two cases? Abai says, Kol shabiyadu neman, if he has the ability to still make it tamei or still make it pigul, then he's going to be believed because it's still within his ability to do. Kol shabiyadu neman. Rava says, but whereas when it was back on a week ago, it's no longer in his ability to affect it. Whereas Rava says, could go in the ashkachei v'lo amrei v'lo midi. So Rava says a different scenario. He found him the first time. It wasn't the first time he met him. The guy didn't say anything the first time he saw him. Well, but only afterwards, ashkachei v'amrei. He didn't say it right away. He raised the issue much later. Now we have a very interesting case. Somebody says to his friend, says, listen, the truma that I prepared for you on that day is no good. I made it tamei. Also coming to Rabbi Ami, came to Rabbi Ami, Amarlei, Shura Sadin Eino Neman. He says, by the letter of the law, he's not believed. Amar fun of Rabbi Yasi. So Rabbi Yasi says to Rabbi Ami, Rabbi, I tell American, are you really saying this? Hachi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Yossi. Ma says Torah Minoso. What can I do? The Torah believed him. So by the letter of the law, he is believed. So the Gemara says, Hechana Minoso. So what is Where did Rabbi Yossi say that he was believed? So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Bisna, where we see by the letter of the law he should have been believed if he said it was pigel. Because he says the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur Yom Chiach. The Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur proves it. Why? The Kiyamar Pigol Me'amen. Because the Kohen Gadol, if he would come out and say, "Oh, I made the sacrifice in the temple. I sprinkled the blood improperly," he's believed. And where would we know? How would we know that the Kohen did it improperly? Nobody's with the Kohen. Nobody's allowed to be with the Kohen then. So we see that we believed even though nobody's with him. So that's like Rabbi Yossi. Mar says, but why? Maybe we heard him speaking about it. And when we heard him speaking about it, we heard him saying this improperly. He said in a loud voice. Maybe he said, listen, I'm sprinkling this in order to bring bring the limbs tomorrow. Maybe that's what he said. Gemara says he loved the Muhammad, and no, if we didn't believe him, if we wouldn't believe him, then even afterwards, even if we heard him, we wouldn't believe him because we could say maybe he said it after he finished. Gemara says but maybe we're looking through a little hole, a little crack, and we saw him doing the service in the Holy of Holies, and that's how we understood, and that's how we knew. So cautious. That's a question on Rav Yossi. Now Gemara has another case. Ahuda also came to Rabbi Ami. A guy came before Rabbi Ami and he said, listen, the Sefer Torah shekasaftu leponi. I wrote a Torah scroll for such and such a person. Askaros shalolo kasaftim. It's the names of God that are in the Torah scroll. Kasaftim lashman. I didn't write them. I didn't say before each name of God, L'Shem Kedushas Hashem, for the purpose of writing the holy name of God. But every time you write the name of God in the Torah scroll, you have to say L'Shem Kedushas Hashem. And if you don't do that, it doesn't have the holiness of the name of God. And so therefore it's not a kosher Torah scroll. So therefore, so it's not kosher. So Rabbi Ami says, Sefer Torah Rabbi Ami, who has the Torah scroll now? He says the buyer has it. He says, I believe you, but you have to give back the money he paid you. Sefer Torah. But you're not believed to say his Torah scroll is no good. So I'm only Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says, why? Why did he just lose the value of the whole Torah scroll? Let him just lose away the value of the name of Hashem. Okay, he loses the value of the names of Hashem, but the Sefer Torah Kulami Hifsid. Listen, how many names of God are there in the Torah? There's 304,805 letters, but how many names of God are there? So maybe there's like 2, 3 on each page, maybe 10, I don't know, but you're going to have, there's going to be plenty of words that you wrote that are not the name of God. You should be paid for that. Shekol Sefer Torah she'enas kar shelo ksuvas l'shman eina shava klum. He says, listen, the Torah scroll does not have the names of God written in it. The Torah scroll is not worth anything. What about the fact that you could just use it like a regular chumash? You could read from it. It should have that value. No, because you're not allowed to keep it around because people might think it's kosher. Mar says, but we have a solution. Why can't you just take your quill, trace it over the name of God, and make it holy after the fact? There's actually another solution. I'll tell you afterwards that he could have done. The Gemara says, must be that Rabbi Ami is saying like whom? It must be that Rabbi Ami is saying not like Rabbi Yehuda. Look, Rabbi Yehuda. It's now we learned in the Mishnah in Masechah Sofrim. We cited this earlier in Daf Chaf, and it's also in Shabbos. There's a space in the Torah you need to write the name of God. Yehuda, and he intends to write Yehuda. He intended to write Yehuda. And then instead of writing Yehuda, he was supposed to write the name of God there, but he didn't intend to write the name of God. He intended to write Yehuda, and then he made a mistake, and he actually wrote the name of God. Then he has to bring the name of the quill over it, and he's able to make it holy. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Yehuda says you can bring the quill over and make it holy. So it must be the Chachamim say Ein Hashem and Amufchar. Chachamim say it's no good. So it must be that Rabbi Ami holds like the Chachamim say you can't just bring the quill over it. Gemara says Afilu Tema Rabbi Yehuda Ad Kan Lo Kama Rabbi Yehuda El Bechada Askara. When does Rabbi Yehuda say this? Only by one mention only by one time. If it's a one-time use of God's name, you could do it. Of the kula sefer Torah lo, misham the milsei kamenumar. Says you can do this by one name of God, but by every single name of God in the Torah, now you're not going to be able to do that because then the Torah is going to look like a leopard. It's going to look spotted, and it's not going to be beautiful anymore, and so they can't write it. The Gemara tells us that this is one solution that you could just trace over the letter of the name of God. There's another solution that you could do about how you could fix this, and this would be, everybody says this, even Chachamim would say theoretically it's okay. You could be koef the shemos. You know how you koef the shemos? You peel off the name. That you could take here, even though this paper looks like it's just one layer, but actually there's multiple layers to this piece of paper. So you could just like you're removing a piece of skin from your body. You could take a razor very sharp and peel off the whole name of God at once. It's called koef shemos. So, but that too wouldn't look good. If you did it once, it would be okay. But if you did it throughout the whole Torah scroll, the Torah scroll will look spotted. There's a problem I had with that Torah scroll I wrote. I wrote the last Torah scroll, the fifth Torah scroll that they just checked it. It's all okay now. But we had a problem because there was one time we're supposed to write the name of God, Yud, Hey, and then Vav and Hey. And then instead of writing Yud, Hey, and Vav and Hey, instead of the Vav at the end, I wrote a Yud, Hey, Yud, Hey. But my intention was the name of God. But the sofer who was checking it, he says, was your intent to write the name of God? If so, he cites the sources that you're allowed to turn that yud into a vav, and that would be okay to change it. But if it wasn't intended to write the name of God, you wouldn't have been able to do that. You would have had to erase the whole thing and then rewrite it. So now the Gemara says,
Rabbi.
that word, yes.
You specifically remembered what your intent was at the.
Well, you don't. It's hard to say specifically where I wrote this, but every time I write the name of God, I say L'Shem Kedushas Hashem, and before I write, every time I start to write, I say L'Shem Kedushas Sefer Torah, Kol Haskar Sheyeshbo, L'Shem Kedushas Hashem. So I do the double thing, and then he said we can rely upon that. No, it wasn't the name of God yet. It wasn't the name of God yet. So you could have erased it there. It wasn't the name of God. I didn't write the name of God, except for the first two letters were written. I don't know. I'd have to ask him what it would be exactly there. So the Gemara says, so he came in front of Rabbi Avo. He said, Sefer Torah shekasavtu aponi gevun shelo avadatim lishmam. You have to not just write the letters of the Torah properly. You have to prepare the parchment called ibud. You have to prepare the parchment for the sake of the Torah scroll. And so, but I didn't do it. He said, Sefer Torah beyond me. He says, who's got the Torah scroll? He said, well, it's beyond lokech. He says, the purchaser has it. He says, okay, the Torah scroll is destroyed. You can't use it. It wasn't real Lashma. Because we believe you about yourself, we believe you the Torah scroll is destroyed. Gemara says, well, why is this case different from the case of Rabbi Ami? Why is Rabbi Avo saying that the whole Torah scroll is not kosher, whereas Rabbi Ami said it's kosher? Rabbi Ami. Gemara says, Hasamiko Meimar Tabid Rabbi Yirmiyah. He says, okay, there by Rabbi Ami, you could say he made the mistake that the sofer thought that he's only going to lose the letters. He's not going to lose the value of the whole Torah scroll. He's just going to lose the values of the names of God. And so that's why he said it. But here the sofer is going to fall on the sword, lose all of his money. Here we say he's telling the truth because he's obviously going to lose all of his money here. Okay, we'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address them.